It was a cold autumn evening when I boarded the late-night train heading to the small town of Ravens Hollow. The journey was supposed to be uneventful, a quiet ride through foggy forests and desolate stations. But as the train rattled into motion, I sensed something was off. The carriage was eerily empty, save for an elderly man seated at the far end and a young woman hunched over a book near the middle. The fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting unsettling shadows on the walls. I chose a seat by the window, trying to shake off the strange unease creeping over me. As the train picked up speed, the world outside blurred into darkness. The gentle rocking and rhythmic clattering of the wheels should have been soothing, but instead they felt like a harbinger of something sinister. I glanced at the elderly man. He was staring out the window, his expression vacant. The young woman had stopped reading and was now fidgeting nervously, her eyes darting to the door at the end of the carriage. At the first stop, no one got on. The train idled for longer than necessary, the hiss of the brakes stretching into an unnatural silence. Then, just as the doors were about to close, a tall figure boarded. He was dressed in an old-fashioned suit, his face pale and gaunt, almost waxy. He moved with an unsettling grace, his eyes scanning the carriage before settling on me. Without a word, he took the seat directly across from mine. I tried to avoid his gaze, but I could feel his eyes boring into me. His presence was suffocating, and the air around him felt colder, as if he carried a pocket of winter wherever he went. The train lurched forward, and I pretended to focus on the passing trees, though my reflection in the window revealed his unwavering stare. The next stop came quickly, but when I glanced at the platform, it was deserted. Not a single soul waited there, and yet the train halted. The doors hissed open, but no one boarded. Instead, a low whispering sound filled the air. It was faint at first, like wind through the cracks, but it grew louder, more insistent. The whispers seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, words just out of comprehension. The elderly man stood abruptly, clutching his chest. "They're here," he muttered hoarsely before collapsing onto the floor. The young woman let out a sharp gasp and ran to his side, but before she could reach him, the lights flickered violently and went out completely. In the pitch-black darkness, the whispers turned into guttural growls. I felt the hairs on my neck stand on end as something brushed against my shoulder. My breath hitched and I scrambled for my phone, fumbling to turn on its flashlight. When the beam of light finally cut through the darkness, the carriage was empty. The elderly man, the young woman, and the pale figure were all gone. The only sound was the rhythmic clatter of the train's wheels, but even that seemed distorted, like it was echoing from some deep, hollow place. Panic set in. I stumbled toward the door at the end of the carriage, desperate to find someone, anyone. As I reached for the handle, the door slid open on its own, revealing the next carriage. It was identical to the one I had just left, down to the flickering lights and empty seats. My heart sank as I realized the truth. I hadn't moved at all. Somehow, I was still in the same carriage. Then I saw them. Figures, shadowy and indistinct, emerging from the far end of the carriage. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, as if they were being dragged by invisible strings. Their faces were voids, featureless and black. Yet I felt their gaze pierce through me. The whispers returned, louder now, merging into a cacophony of voices that seemed to speak directly into my mind. "You shouldn't be here," they intoned in unison, their voices layered with malice and sorrow. I stumbled backward, retreating to the other end of the carriage. My hands found the emergency brake, and without thinking, I yanked it. The train screeched violently, throwing me off balance and sending me crashing to the floor. When I looked up, the figures were gone, and the train had come to a complete stop. I bolted for the door and forced it open, leaping onto the tracks. The night was oppressively dark, the forest around me a maze of shadows, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get as far away from that cursed train as possible. As I ran, I glanced back. The train was still there, its windows glowing faintly. And in one of them, I saw the pale man, his waxy face illuminated by an unnatural light. He raised a hand in a slow, deliberate wave before the train's lights flickered and it vanished into the darkness, leaving only silence in its wake. I eventually made it to a small roadside diner, where a kindly trucker gave me a ride to Ravens Hollow. When I told him about the train, he went pale. That line, It's been closed for years, he said. There was a derailment. Dozens died. No train runs there anymore. I didn't sleep that night, nor the nights that followed. To this day, I avoid trains entirely. But sometimes, when the night is quiet and the wind is just right, I swear I can hear the faint clatter of wheels on rails and the whispers of those who never made it home.